Welcome to video 2 of Get to Know Tasha Jackson. In this series, or this part of the series, I will talk to you today about my spirituality. So, in video 1, I talked about my introduction to plant medicine. So, I did make that video in 2021, but I really wanted to have that as the introduction video of how I progressed over the last 22 years in that part of my journey. But today I want to talk about my spirituality because spirituality is something that is becoming increasingly popular. People are finding new and different ways to express themselves. People are becoming more open to what else is out there. NASA is studying aliens now, and there are all these interesting things going on. I will also talk to you about my physics journey in a separate video. But so the first, and there's no script, I'm just talking here. So let's go back to whenever I was a child. So when I was a child, my first experiences with spirituality, and I will try to refrain from giving biased opinions because, again, a journey is a journey, and I don't want people to walk away from any of these videos with any kind of negative connotations or that I think a certain way or feel a certain way, because those experiences were part of my journey and I value them, actually, because I wouldn't be who I am today without having had those experiences. So as a child, I grew up kind of partially in a church. So my mom was not a spiritual person. It was the other people in my life that were spiritual and took me to church with them. And so some of my first experiences in the church were, I don't know, even from a young age, I was always questioning, why do we do the things that we do? Who said that we're supposed to do that? This book that we follow, why do we follow it? As a child, I was just full of lots and lots of questions that questioned religion and religious practices. And so since my mother was not religious, I never went to Sunday school. I never learned about any of those things in the church. And so, I was kind of left to my own imagination and my observations of the way that people behaved, the way that people interacted. And some of my first experiences in the church were definitely, I don't understand why it's said to do these things, but then I experience or observe people doing not those things. So in teaching, we call those examples and non-examples. So within religion and going to church, I had lots of non-examples of how to be in my spiritual life. And so one of the things that I really learned is that there's a real distinction in between spirituality, which is where you feel God within you, you feel a part of the world, you live within the concept of the world instead of outside of the world, or a separate part of the world. Because we're human, we are conditioned to believe that, we have dominion over everything. Somehow we're above, right? All other things, whenever in reality, no, we are living in the same world as everything else. And so, again, from a very young age, I really developed this very deep philosophical view of the world. I was raised as an only child. My sister was not born until I was an adult. And so I had lots of alone time, and I spent a lot of my time outside in nature, in the forest, running around doing, stuff and picking flowers and catching bugs and swimming in the streams and things like that. And so I had this inner knowing, or I had this feeling within me, like whenever I was in the church, one of the things I could never understand was, why do I have to talk to the priest, or why do I have to talk to pastor? And then that person talks to God. Can't I talk to God myself? And so I always had that inner knowing. And so for me, I always, I guess in a sense, spoke to God directly, or spoke to God through my heart and in my own way, which was very different than what I was being told is what the experience that I should have. Right. And so, of course, then I felt weird. And then I grew up feeling weird and, kind of out of place. And, it wasn't until very recently that I was just like, the way that I am is the way that I am, and it's okay, but it took me, quite some time to get to that point. And so, as a child in my very early years, 5 to 10 years old, I was raised with a certain set of beliefs, but my inner being always questioned and challenged those beliefs. And so then as I was a teenager, as a teenager, no one's concerned, no teenagers. And, no, actually, I shouldn't say that, because I've had some fairly religious students, but for the most part, the vast majority of my students, they were not necessarily really, wholeheartedly on a religious journey, or, full on into religious aspects, right? They're concerned with their friends and fashion and pop culture and things and music and things like that. But still, as a teenager, whenever I was about 15 years old, I really started to question, well, where do these ideas even come from in the first place? And so that's whenever I really started to delve into the realm of ancient religions. So 15 years old, here I am at the library, and back then there was no internet. So here I am at the library trying to find, all of this history on the religions that I knew, and then trying to find religions that I didn't know. And so I started to develop this larger world view, or this sense of, this is much bigger and there's much more out there than what I have been taught and what I have come to understand, or what I've come to experience. And so I really started, very aggressively diving into, spiritual practices from other cultures, religions from other cultures, religions throughout time. What are things that they believe? How did those beliefs from thousands of years ago shape and change over time? Some of the things that, were beliefs from 10,000 years ago, we would still believe today. So, for example, the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you want done unto you. And so that's one of the things that has carried across time and space. And so around 17 years old, I decided, I made the decision that I formally was going to no longer participate in any activities that were church related. After I had went to I went on a weekend retreat, and the things that I was being taught there didn't resonate with my inner being at all. And so then it was around Christmas time, and my family was getting ready to celebrate Christmas, and that's whenever I had kindly excused myself from that holiday. And that was the first time that I had made that firm, solid decision that I was no longer going to participate in those belief systems that I had grown up with, which you can imagine in my household, even though not a religious household, still did not go very well, because I was still breaking from ideas and beliefs that were consistent as a secular part in my family. And so then around 19, again, I was, really in search of God, right? And so I really wanted to know for myself. I wanted to have that experience for myself. And so I sought out different ways of being. And so at that time, I had converted to Islam, and I started to learn about Islam very slowly, of course. But I did over 20 years, right? I was a Muslim for 20 years. And over that period of time, of course, I was very engrossed. I was ultra Orthodox for about 15 years. And I learned a lot about the way that religion can be expressed over time and through different cultures. So if you find yourself watching this video and you're of a certain religion, I do encourage you to look within your own religion first at the different sects, because there are different, secular or sects within a particular religion that have different ideas, right? So again, we look at any of the major religions in the world today, and you find different variations being expressed in different cultures and in different areas. And so, do some research and see, maybe there's an expression that is a little bit more aligned with who you are at this moment. Because again, on the spiritual journey, we change over time. And so the person that, or the part of the religion that you were practicing, 10 years ago is not what you're doing today. Whereas, or your beliefs have changed, or the things that you learn may be a little bit different than they were before. And so, definitely I encourage you to look there first, unless your inner being is screaming like mine was, then okay, show's over. It's time to move on. You've learned everything that you need to learn from this experience, and now it's time to have a new experience. And so when I divorced at 32, I really found myself at this crossroads of, okay, well, what am I going to do now? Is this still the person I am? Is this still what I believe? And so I I did another soul search, right? I started diving back into the books. Thank goodness the internet is available now, and I can do research a lot faster, and I can learn more from different sources, a variety of sources. I can find, whenever I was really heavily studying Buddhism, I was able to find, all of the Buddhist temples that were within a 10-mile radius of my house a lot easier than I could flipping through a phone book. And, I just really went on another, who am I kind of journey, right? And so from there, I started studying Chinese medicine. You heard about that in the plant medicine journey. So I started studying Chinese medicine. I started studying Tao. I had a friend that was going through some really difficult life situations, and she invited me to the Tao Center with her, Tao Center with her. And so I started learning that as well. And I started learning, how do the Eastern philosophies, how do they perceive life? How do they perceive death? What are some of the practices that they have? I had been doing yoga for 20 years, but we were looking at it I was looking at it from a secular point of view, not a religious or a spiritual point of view. And so I started integrating more of a spiritual aspect into my yoga that I was doing every day just for health for my physical body. Then it started to become part of my spiritual and emotional well-being as well. And so, now I can say with confidence that, at this point in my spiritual journey, I consider myself to be a spiritual warrior. And if you would like to join me on the spiritual warrior journey, I do have a course out at this time. And you can find that through the link below, or you can find that from my website, naturallyinspiredmedia.com. It's been a long day, sorry. And, just looking back at my experiences and saying, I see that there are other people out there that have really struggled to find themselves, or really are struggling to figure out, what is it that I value? Who am I? What is it that I believe? Because I've been told by society, I've been told by friends and family, right? I've had all of these external influences that have shaped who I am. Now it's time to shape who I am for myself. And so before I close, I just want to say that at this point in time where I'm at is I used to study physics. That's going to be another video. How did I start to study physics? Tasha and her stories, that's what you'll say. Um, and so now what I'm starting to understand and realize about the world is that there was a point in time where priests and scientists were one and the same. So, for example, Johannes Kepler, he was a priest and he was a scientist. Galileo, priest and scientist. And there are lots of other examples of priests and scientists. So, spirituality, so the metaphysical and the physical, so the physics part of it, how we perceive our world, we're together. And then some point in time, they were separated. And so for me, I'm really finding that juncture again of how is it that our world works? How is it that we are shaped by the physical reality that we live in? How do all of these particles that we cannot see, how do they interact with our bodies? And then, how can we find healing naturally in the world um, through these different modes? And how do we show up differently based on the way that we choose to live our lives for ourselves, based on our own definition of happiness and success, instead of our ways of being that were defined for us, right? And so that's where I am now on the spiritual journey. I still, the warrior in me has now transformed into the wise sage teacher. And being an educator for the past 15 years, I never had thought that I would be teaching spirituality, or I'd be teaching, how do spirituality and physics, how much they actually have in common, or how all of that kind of works, my understanding of the universe, and kind of carving out my own little niche in the world and then sharing it with other people and being very open and vulnerable. So I hope that you found this video beneficial. Please look out for more podcasts that I have. So a lot of these things are just musings or ideas or things that I come up with that I want to write about or talk about. More videos in this series of understanding who I am as a person, and in hopes that you can better understand yourself. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi. If you like the content that I create, please do make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. And check out my website, naturallyinspiredmedia.com, and some of the other videos that I have produced here.